probably know, the issue of reintegration in our global language is usually one part of three, right? DDR. And the specific situation in Ukraine, where we focus also today on reintegration more than on the D and on the D, in some way can be interpreted two ways. I mean, we wish we had DDR in Ukraine right now. On the other hand, without the D and without the other D, we also have an advantage, I would propose. In many countries around the world, when peace deals are struck, and suddenly countries are left with large numbers of militants, many words are given to them, soldiers, usually we have to panic and go very quickly, invent this, invent that. We've never done this before. Where it's coming from? How should we do this? And move very quickly and often very amateurishly. The fact that in Ukraine at the moment there is no D and no D also gives us that advantage that we have time to think. We have a reintegration challenge already, but the reintegration challenge in fact is rather small at the moment compared to what will come to us if we would have a fully fledged DDR process one day, God willing. So the advantage that we're having, I believe I want to congratulate the organizers, is that we can talk in relative peace and without too much time pressure about how we envisage this thing to happen in the future. And we can already experiment around what is done and what can be done in the R. As the United Nations, we are always excited when that happens, particularly when we look forward and anticipate problems rather than be stuck with it and say, oh, now we have to panic and we have to do things quickly. So I believe we're making use of that advantage today, and that's why I'm very excited to be here. UNDP in Ukraine already has ongoing programs in the East, particularly that tackle some of the infrastructure challenges, also the economic challenges with small business development, entrepreneurship, employment, and also elements of community security and social cohesion. But I have to admit, particular target groups very often are not yet distinguished. We find it easy to distinguish IDPs from host communities, right? We start to distinguish people living in the gray zone or close to the contact line from others because we see that the needs are very different. We do see that the people living in non-government controlled areas definitely have specific challenges. People that have their properties destroyed, people that have large families, all of those people, they have their specific needs. And I would propose that today we have a chance to look at the specific needs of ATO veterans, which is a great opportunity. In terms of global practice, we need to be encouraged by the fact that we are not the first country that is deliberating issues of D and R. And that's why I want to point to the global best practice that is actually developed under the leadership of the United Nations and could be boiled down in one booklet. I remember using it in the past, but now I couldn't even find the title, but it's the operational guide of the integrated DDR standards. That contains a lot of goodies that we need to start building on, because that is the practice in other countries. It doesn't mean it says what you have to do now, or it says how it should be done in Ukraine, but it has a lot of wisdom on how this was done elsewhere, particularly also has a lot of wisdom on what not to do. Because very often, particularly under time pressure, we do very stupid things. And then 2 years later we think, oh, I wish we had not made that decision. It looked very appropriate at the time. We panicked. But 2 years later, oh, that was very wrong. So also particularly on what not to do, I believe those standards are useful. For today's discussions, I would just put a few questions on the table that are on my mind. Integration and reintegration of particular groups in the communities. We like to think that this is a positive thing, but as we know, it can reinforce social cohesion, but it can also very much undermine social cohesion. That's why it's very critical what we do and what we propose for those groups. The second thing I wanted to say is that we have to make use of international best practice. Obviously, that may be my point here today, but at the same time, these processes have to be very Ukrainian, right? And even they have to be tailored for particular localities. We know that many of the areas in the East are not typically Ukrainian. So the input of the communities, civil society and private sector, particularly in the locations where we're talking about, is absolutely critical. So that knowledge and experience needs to be merged with the international knowledge and experience. And that would require us to work together. There is no simple answer to these things, and unless we find answers together among those groups, we will not be successful. And finally, of course, let's build on what has been already done in other countries in the world, and this is also where is my offer. I was tempted to come to this meeting, particularly because I believe that also as United Nations, particularly in whatever need you have, I believe we would be able to contribute, and we would like to be part of this discussion in the future, even if at some stage we have to panic, because something very good has happened to the country. We hope to be there, and we hope to support these processes. So thank you very much, and we wish you well in your deliberations today.